Hey, it's Yay for Yarn, and today I'm comparing the gold-plated versus the nickel-plated Furls Odyssey hooks. So first off, I'd like to mention here that Furls Crochet did send me these two Lime Odyssey hooks to try, but they did not ask me to make this video. So this video is not sponsored, but they did send me these hooks to try them out. So if you've been following my channel for a while, and you've watched a lot of my crochet videos, chances are you probably know already that the Furls Odyssey is my #1 favorite crochet hook of all the different types that I've tried. And if you haven't seen my original video on the Furls Odyssey hook, I will link that down below if you want more detail in explaining, what's the difference between this hook and a regular hook. But just as a brief overview, the Furls Odyssey hooks are meant to be extremely ergonomic. And so instead of a little skinny handle that's about this big for this size of hook, we have a handle that is about 3/4 of an inch thick. It's a very thick handle, and it is meant to make sure that your hands do not have to close too tightly, or even your fingertips don't have to close too tightly to hold on to it, because if your hand is closed real tight, like about this much, and you're moving it around and swiveling your wrist, that puts a lot more strain on your hands. So this hook is designed with a jumbo handle on it, so that even if you're using a smaller hook tip, you can have that big handle that relaxes your hand and does not require your hand to close all the way. Now, another thing that the Furls Odyssey has that most hooks do not is it is weighted. So the handle of this hook is weighted right about here. It's called forward weighted, and that is so that as you're moving, it's supposed to give you extra momentum as you are moving the hook, because it keeps the weight at the front and it helps continue the motion that you are making with your hands, but not requiring your hands to do quite as much work. So those are my two favorite things about the Odyssey, and I have several of these in several different colors, and I use them as much as I possibly can for my projects because they are truly my favorite hook. And if you would like more information on the Odyssey hooks, I do have a video on that, as I mentioned, so go check that out if you want more information on this specific hook. But what we're looking at today is the comparison between the gold-plated and the nickel-plated. So I have been using the nickel-plated hooks because those are less expensive than the gold ones, of course. But Furls Crochet sent me a couple of these hooks to try out. These are the brand new lime green Odysseys. They come in a bunch of different colors, but every now and then they come out with a brand new color, and this is their latest release. So these just came out, and they come in both the nickel-plated and the gold-plated. So on all of the Odyssey hooks that I have bought, I've always bought the nickel-plated because they are significantly cheaper to purchase than the gold ones. But they sent me a gold one and a nickel-plated, so I'm going to go ahead and try to kind of compare whether I think the gold-plated version is better or the nickel-plated version. Now, I have used the nickel-plated ones quite a bit. I've had nickel-plated Odysseys for a couple years now, and I have been using them almost non-stop as far as on all of my projects, unless I don't have the right size for the project that I'm making. But this is my first time trying out the gold-plated hook. So one thing that I have noticed about these two green Odysseys, the lime green ones, is that the nickel-plated hook tip is actually about 1/4 inch, maybe slightly over 1/4 inch longer on the I than it is on the H. So I decided to kind of lay them out with some of my other Odysseys and compare, because I have another H and another I. This turquoise Odyssey is a J. This is an I. This is an H. This is another H. And this one is an I. So if we kind of line these up, you can't really lay them out perfectly straight on the table like this, because they do tip forward with that forward weight in the handle. But you can still see that with the two H hooks right here and right here, the tips are about the same length. With this I and this J right here, the purple and the turquoise, those are also about the same length. But this I, this lime green I hook, is actually longer than the J in the turquoise. So I don't know why that is, but I have noticed that this one is a little bit longer. And the length is still okay for me, but I do prefer the length of some of my other Odysseys. So I think the gold-plated one is keeping the length of the rest of these. I don't know if they're changing the length of the eye hooks for some reason, but I personally think that this is just a little long for my hand. And the reason I say that is because occasionally for some stitches I like to put my fingertip on the loop to hold it still while I do, like a puff stitch or something like that. And with this slightly longer hook, I do find that it is a little bit of a stretch, so I end up moving my hand up a little further on the handle to be able to put my finger there. But I also realize that that's not the greatest thing to do all the time if you're going for ergonomics and you don't want to put strain on your hands. So with a slightly shorter one like the H, and I've found the rest of these to be pretty consistent, it's a little bit easier to reach your finger forward and put your finger on the back of the hook if you need to, and occasionally I do need to, although I do try to avoid that most of the time. So I'm not exactly sure why this particular lime eye hook is a little bit longer, but it doesn't really bother me that much. I would just prefer that it was the same length as the rest of these. Now, what we're really trying to compare here is the finish on either the gold or the nickel. I did mention the length because that is kind of an obvious difference, and I felt like that should be mentioned as well. But we want to compare the gold versus the nickel plated. And so what I've been doing is over the last few days I've been testing out some stitch patterns and some swatches, both with the same yarn, so that I can kind of get a feel for how slick the surface is of both of these hooks. Now, although we are mainly talking about the finish here, I have also noticed that the hook tips are just a slightly different shape as well. And that has kind of affected how it feels when it goes in and out of the fabric. And if they are changing over to this particular hook tip shape, I really like this gold-plated hook tip. It's only slightly different. It's just that it's more tapered toward the very tip, whereas this one is more round at the very tip. And I think this actually glides in and out of stitches better than this shape. But I've been using this shape for several years, and I've never really had problems with it going in and out of stitches. I just think that this gold version is slightly better at that with its slightly different shape. But as I have been testing these hooks, even when you just kind of rub your finger across them, you can kind of feel that the gold is slightly slicker than the nickel. And part of the reason why I love the Odyssey so much is because they are slick. I want to be able to crochet fast and let that hook fly in and out of the stitches without putting too much work and tension on my hand as I am crocheting. So I really like when the hook is very slick. Now with the nickel plated, they are pretty slick. They're definitely more slippery than wood or plastic or aluminum hooks, but the gold plated is actually slightly slicker. And that is something that I definitely noticed as I was working. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up this swatch here and crochet with it for just a second. So I really like to be able to reach my index finger to the tip to hold on to the tops of stitches like that. But one thing that I have really noticed is the glide. I really love the glide on the gold hooks. And it's not some kind of like drastic difference, but you can feel the difference a little bit in that glide as you're working across. And you can also feel a slight difference in the shape of that hook tip as you're working through the fabric. So overall, I do think that the gold-plated finish is a little bit nicer than the nickel-plated. And to be able to notice a difference like that even though I've been working with the nickel-plated Odysseys for a while, it's enough of a difference that it is noticeable to a degree. It's not like some kind of drastic change, but you can feel a little bit more glide in the hook with this gold-plated Odyssey than what I'm used to with the nickel-plated Odysseys, which are already pretty slick and glide pretty nicely. But the gold-plated has just a little bit more glide to it than what I'm used to on the nickel-plated, and I really like that. I prefer more glide. So I really actually enjoy the feel of this gold-plated hook. Now, I haven't even really made any huge projects with this yet. All I've been doing is doing some sample pieces and some test swatches, but I can feel the difference in the two finishes. Even just with your finger, there's a slight difference there in the glide. This definitely has a little bit more glide to it, and it just slides in and out of the fabric so nicely. Now, I do think that part of why it slides in and out so nicely is that slightly different, slightly more tapered hook tip. But either way, the hook tip is great. The shape of the handle is great. And if I were to buy another Odyssey, I would probably buy the nickel-plated. Why? Because this one is half the price of the gold-plated one. So the nickel-plated Odysseys retail for $33 when they're not on sale. Occasionally they do have sales. And the gold-plated ones are $66. Now, obviously they're more expensive because they're gold-plated. But as I mentioned, if I were to buy another Odyssey, I would buy a nickel-plated one. Not because I think the nickel-plated is better, but because it is way less expensive. Now, is the gold one slightly better in my opinion? Yes, it is. I really like the finish of this one better than the nickel-plated, but I don't know that it's quite worth paying twice as much for just that bit of extra glide. I really like the extra glide, but if I were to compare these two and purchase them myself, I don't know that I would pay twice as much for that glide. I could have two hooks for the same price of one of these. So chances are if I were to purchase one, I would definitely continue to purchase the nickel-plated ones, but the gold is really nice and I do like the finish of this one better. So if you are wanting the absolute best crochet hook you can possibly get, go for the gold-plated one. But if you're just looking to try out an ergonomic hook and you want that speed and that forward-weighted handle and the ergonomic shape, then I would suggest to go for the nickel-plated one and get two nickel-plated ones for the same price as one gold. And a lot of people are crocheting, just casually for fun anyway, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great. But my point being, since I crochet as my job, I really like the feel of this gold-plated one, and if you're somebody like that, it might be worth it to you to pay double and get that extra glide if you want to crochet really fast and get a lot of things done in a short amount of time. But you can still get quite a bit of glide off of this nickel-plated hook and work very quickly with it if you don't want to spend twice as much to get the gold. So overall, as always, I think both of these are great hooks. The Odysseys are my favorite of all the hooks that I have ever used, and the ones that I have sitting out here right now are not even all of the Odysseys I have. I do have a few more. But I am really happy with both of these styles, so I will continue to use all of them in all of my projects from here on because they are just the best, most ergonomic, comfortable crochet hook that I have ever used, and I use them for everything. So if you want to try out the Furls Odyssey crochet hooks, I have a link in my description box down below. You can go and check those out. And if you have ever tried either one of these finishes on the Odyssey hooks, let me know what you think, because I really like to hear your thoughts on whether you think the gold is better or the nickel-plated. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know how you like the Furls Odyssey hooks in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, making sure you click the little bell next to the subscribe button to be notified of new videos. Thanks for watching.